Welcome to Bible Study for Progressives, a show where moderates, liberals, and leftists of all faiths and ideologies come together to discuss Scripture, spirituality, and politics. We engage Scripture in its historical context, plumb its depths for wisdom and guidance, and apply its lessons to current events and social issues. Whether you're a liberal evangelical, a New Age spiritualist, a social justice activist, or a postmodern theologian, there's something in this show for you. Come, be energized in spirit and mind to understand the Word and what it means to be a spiritual person in today's world.
Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedules. I have two guests. We have Rich Pasita. Number one, he's a constitutional lawyer. Very important information that he can share today with us. And he's also been working with a plethora of partnerships that are connected to impeach.org groups, really important shifters on the planet for, ethics and honesty, integrity. Anyway, and he has Bible Studies, a podcast. It's Bible Studies for Progressives. Welcome, Rich. And then Andy Miller, who has spent his life immersed in politics and computer programs since 1973. Today, the discussion will be around our Constitution versus corruption via mass media propaganda. Mass media psychology and propaganda that's been used against us by the elite for eons on this planet, and how we can use this program and our information we're sharing to bring in real democracy. So welcome, Rich, and welcome, Andy. Thank you for being on the show today. What's your update, Rich? What's happening?
Well, I guess one update, obviously, on the impeachment front and on the trial is that the trial's coming, and there looks like there's going to be pressure to have witnesses. And I think this is one thing people didn't really consider is process, that this is a formal proceeding, and it has rules, and things are going to have to be carried out in an orderly fashion, so that what does it look like if it's dismissed without a trial? That doesn't look good for the Republicans. Can they really do that? Everybody thinks they're just going to dismiss it, but can they really do that and get away with it? And we only need 4 Republicans to call for witnesses, and we're going to get witnesses. And then once we get witnesses, anything can happen. More is coming out every day. So it's not occurring as people had feared, that somehow it's just going to help Trump. It's not helping Trump. It's hurting him. And while it's still a long shot for him to be removed, it's not going to look good. I mean, the Democrats are going to get the opportunity to present the evidence. If it's not dismissed outright before the trial, the Democrats are going to get the opportunity to present their case. And after that, if you just dismiss it without presenting any exculpatory evidence, I mean, you're going to have to do that. And so you can't dismiss it. So it's got to go all the way. So, and then we never know what could happen, what could come out, what documents we get, what type of resistance we face, how it makes the senators feel. The Senate is different from the House. The House is much more rancorous and argumentative, and the Senate is more stately. And so this is a different environment as well, and they're not going to be able to get up there and argue and mislead and divert and distract, and all the questions have to go through the Chief Justice. So we don't know what's going to happen, but it's looking good for rein in this president, even if we can't remove him, to keep him from damaging us before we can get them out of office, and we really need to do that. But there's a problem, and the problem is propaganda. If you wanted to ask, why do right-wingers do things against their interests? Well, the answer would be propaganda. Why do we have such division in this country? Why are we so divided? The answer is propaganda. Why is the left so ineffective and unable to coalesce around any idea or in some ways? Why is there always division on the left that inhibits us? Well, the answer is propaganda. And so propaganda, it's really a broad term. It could be a form of advertising, is a form of propaganda. Well, you often distinguish propaganda by its sort of deceptiveness and manipulativeness. And one important thing to remember is that propaganda can be true, but it's just enough information to lead us to the wrong conclusion. And it's what's called a logical fallacy, that it appeals to us emotionally and hooks us, but it's really not sufficient to support the conclusion that's being alleged. And it may even, so it doesn't have to be false. It could be true information, and yet it's just manipulating us emotionally. It could be what Zizek calls a signifier, that these ideas have meaning and signify something, either whose side one's on or some hated idea. The one that's coming down right now, we already had, in the past, we had the one on the Constitution, that the Constitution was a document created by slaveholders and was so flawed that it's not even worth defending. And that goes along with the propaganda that America doesn't have a real democracy. Therefore, that democracy, U.S. democracy, is not worth fighting for. So here we have the propagandist has spread the information to his enemies, misleading information that they've been targeted and sucked right up. So it doesn't have to be necessarily misinformation. It can be true information that is there, but the conclusion isn't logically connected, or there's something missing there. It's usually very shallow, appeals to people's emotions, gets them riled up and angry. And we have that. We're inundated. It comes from the media. It comes from religious institutions. It comes from the press. It comes from governments. It comes from our groups.
Well, I think that it's a key element that many people in power want the public to be riled up and angry. They want them to be in disarray, fighting with each other, because then they're distracted from watching what the people in power are doing. And that way the public won't think straight, and they're more susceptible to propaganda.
Yeah, that's it. And that's what they're trying to do: confuse, distract, neutralize. That propaganda, for example, against the Constitution, against our democracy, made it hard for us to fight to defend the Constitution. The Constitution is actually a living document. It's been amended. It changes over time. So it's not the same document. It's not stuck in history. But the propaganda is it was created by slaveholders, and therefore it's not worth defending. Really, that's the propaganda that's being spread on the left. And now the new propaganda that's coming down right now is Christian nationalism and Christian fascism. It's basically the connection of two words, a hated word, attach it to Christianity. I think politics I'm coming to see is not so much about policy as it is about labels and emotions. And so that's why Trump can call Sleepy Joe Biden or Crooked Hillary. It's labeling somebody and appealing to somebody.
Well, calling names is right out of the playbook of psychological warfare, in case you think that's being done amateurishly. That's a professional, that's a known, educated item to call names. It's a specific, it dates back substantially decades ago. It's a known technique in psych warfare, that name calling. And it's fascinating to listen to who's called a name and who's not. You'll find that people who are really challenging enemies are much less likely to be called a name. It's much harder to label them.
And this propaganda isn't coming like you would think it's coming from the groups, and it is. I mean, the leaders of the Poor People's Campaign has come down with Christian nationalism. This group I'm in, Refuse Fashion, the leaders come down with this fascist Christianity, and you see articles and people talking about it. And why is it coming out now? Well, it's coming out now because this is the election. And what they want is the election to be about Christianity and socialism. So Christian-hating socialists versus...
Well, you'll be pleased to know that I heard a reporter discuss, he traveled with Bernie Sanders for the last year, and he said a lot of the people that follow Bernie are not what you would think. And when they were confronted with, are you a socialist, they'd say that those labels don't matter to us anymore. We want health care for everybody. So his take was a lot of that World War II, Cold War propaganda is no longer effective like it used to be.
Yeah, and that's what it does. It's no longer about health care. It's no longer about fighting for democracy. It's no longer about defending the Constitution. It's no longer about peace and war. It's not about immigration. It's not about police brutality. It's not about jobs or the economy. The election becomes about Christianity. And that's absolutely where we don't want to be. It's interesting that the propaganda, you think it comes from the Poor People's Campaign. You think they would know that this is propaganda that's going to hurt our cause. But
I'm a little sad. I'm a little saddened because I've heard some people squabble with other members that share their values because of propaganda that's been inserted by people outside, and they don't appear to be smart enough to realize it's being conjured up outside of their cause. That's my concern. If I could say one thing to activists on all fronts, I would say beware, be smart, be alert. Don't let anybody else tell you what you're upset about. There's a lot of people that want to throw you into disarray. Just be very careful not to be used by those people.
I'm going to jump in here because being used by the people and the propaganda machine is really the elite programming of the corporatocracy or oligarchy that's happening right now with, that's been happening along the lines of trade. Yeah, right. NAFTA, free trade, where is it? Oh, for the oligarchs,
Well, Lynn, the problem, Lynn, is you're finding a specific few items. The problem is there's so much propaganda that if you just tackle and try and debuse a few items, you're going to be countered with, but what about this other stuff? It's not about a particular item. It's not about penal industrial. It's not about immigration. It's broader than that. The people who want to use propaganda will find an issue, and you cannot keep up with debunking each of the issues. What we have to focus on is what are they doing. And I've fixed 6 things, but I could provide a site with the techniques they're using. Don't listen to the content, listen to the techniques. If there's several techniques they use, like they might say, I never met so-and-so, but it doesn't mean that they weren't involved, like Rich said. I was never told, but perhaps they were emailed. They parse their words. It's one technique. Another technique is psychological projection. They'll accuse their opponent in a way that describes exactly what they do. A third way is the technique of speak out of both sides of your mouth. I didn't do it. Yes, of course I did. I never met him. Yes, of course I met him. That way you've got all bases covered. Just don't worry about people telling you lied. You've got whatever you want, whatever people want to take. You can say, look, I said blah, blah, blah. Another thing is distraction. The shiny object over there instead of what's happening behind closed doors. Make it about someone else or create a crisis. The next one is focus on someone else to blame. Pick a race, a gender, a religious affiliation. It's their fault. You have them to blame. Don't look at us just because we're responsible. It's them. Now, these are all sort of parts of what is essentially psychological warfare. Another thing that they tend to do is they tend to say, they'll tend to find someone to focus on. Like in this case, it's all about Joe Biden. Frankly, I don't really care about Joe Biden, but it's typical to focus on something else while your people are being arrested. Another thing they like to do is threaten to sue or sue some. They use the court system for a weapon. They threaten to sue, and either they bankrupt their opponent by flooding with paper, or they delay long enough to get off the hook for the thing in the first place. And so that's my very short version of a few techniques. When you hear people doing that, no matter what the subject matter is, something's up. They're trying to pull the wool over your eyes, no matter what the subject matter. So listen for those things.
Yeah, and one of the things that people can do is to speak up individually, and that allows other people to also speak about.
I entirely agree. Don't be afraid to stand up. Just because you're standing up doesn't make you an aggressor. You can stand up with dignity and principle. Don't be afraid to stand up and be heard. I agree 100% with that.
What's hard about it, though, is that if I've come to the conclusion that all propaganda comes from the top, we often think of propaganda, I think I probably said this, as crazy ideas coming from crazy people on the bottom of the heap, but it's not. It's coming from the top. So that makes it difficult because the group itself is following the leader. So if you go against the leader, it's difficult, but you have to speak up. The other thing is, eventually, when the leader's doing it, there's not a whole lot you can do, and except speak up, and you may not be long for the group. But
there are a lot of brave people. There are a lot of brave people who have said, "My patriotism is more important than my future with this group."
Yes, and other things that you can look for, I think, are you have to consider the effects of an idea. Is this really what we want to be talking about? And we can go to the Christian message. Do we really want to be talking about Christianity during the election? Is that really the issue?
I can almost pick it out now. When something comes up and I'm supposed to be thinking about it, I always ask myself, what am I being distracted from? What's really happening? Because now it's like a clock. Almost you can set your watch. When something suddenly comes up, my first question is, okay, what do they now want me to look at? What's really happening?
All the churches and 501c3, some of the churches especially, if they are supporting Trump, just straight out Trump, or straight out a political party, if they're totally against the left right now, right? Because they're, into the money machine of the wars, whatever they've been programmed. This is all programming, okay? They have to realize they need to be, all their assets need to be taken. Okay, it's against the law. That's part of the Constitution that's being thwarted. That you can't. These people that are promoting these churches, especially that are involved in this mass warfare of hate and division, all of them. I mean, they need to have their churches, all the assets forfeitured. I mean, really, all of it, and they need to be closed.
In order to enforce laws, you need a law enforcement mechanism that is not corrupted by the people in power. In order to enact good legislation, you need to unclog the political system, which is clogged right now by some powerful political forces. My advice to everybody, vote. Check your registration every couple of weeks. Make sure you've not been removed from the rolls, and vote. That's the bottom line here. Because if we don't vote out the clog,
legislation that unites everybody so that they want to vote.
There's already a lot of wonderful legislation sitting not being acted on because we have a political system that's corrupted.
Yeah, isn't it like, they actually, what's really sad, and I don't know if you know about this, Rich, but in the House, 400 different bills that actually were supposed to help, be voted on and checked out and looked over, and they won't even go. They're not even accepting them to even look at them in the Senate. That is really frightening. I mean, how do we change that kind of propaganda and legislation?
The way you change that is you vote out the Senate Majority Leader. The way you change that is you vote out the Senate Majority Leader. He's the one standing in the way. Issues like the nonprofits, these are lengthy, tangled issues, Lynn, that aren't so simple, and they've been argued about for years and years and years. I want to say one thing before I let Rich in, which is this upcoming Senate trial is going to be very interesting. They think they have complete control. The people in power believe they have it all locked up. They believe it's predetermined. They believe they can overrule the judge, anything he says. They believe they can make rules to disallow unfavorable information about their boss. They believe all this stuff, and they're probably right on paper. But the power of the media and their interviews afterwards, and the power of the press, and the law of unintended circumstances.
Come on.
Certain important aspects of evidence are not even being broadcast to the public on some channels, and that bothers me.
Yeah.
Well, I think they're probably not right on paper, but they're going to try and change the paper and rewrite the paper. But on paper,
what I want to know is, will when they vote, when the Senate votes to change the rules or disallow witnesses or disallow evidence, will we get to see that? I think they do that behind closed doors, and that's what I think is wrong.
Well, I think there's some idea to do it behind closed doors in the Constitution was to keep it from being a political spectacle. And I think that's probably okay. But I think that the process itself, I mean, these processes, like for instance, when you go into a courtroom, you see the judges seated high up on a bench, and you're looking up to. But there's a reason for that. The reason is that you're more likely to tell the truth when the judge is staring down at you.
Yeah, but that's in a court. That's not in the Senate. In the Senate, they have the power of overruling the judge, and that's what concerns me.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of concerns here. I mean, there's no doubt that there are concerns. But I think that we have to take the formal proceeding into account to see, well, how is this actually going to work? And what's actually going to happen? Because the system is designed to create fairness. It may fail, but they put the rules in. The Constitution is designed to work. It may not work, but it's designed to work so that we get justice. That's
well. Even if the trial is not successful, there's a constant drumbeat of evidence coming out around the media, and 67% of the country hears that. In a sense, justice will be done anyway, whether or not a conviction occurs here, because it's starting to all come out, and sooner or later, it's all going to come out. It's just a question of time.
I agree with that. I think the public is going to be the ultimate juror, and the role of the Democrats is to make sure that this does not come out in a way that's favorable for Trump, whether he wins or loses. Now, I wanted to get back to the churches. Any minister who says that Trump is God should have his license, should have the church's 501c3, their charity status.
Yeah, the problem is that the people who would revoke that are also preaching that Trump is God.
It's not. I would say it's something different. I would say that nobody's really preaching that Trump is God. And what I've read is that preachers are actually coming into the pulpit and saying, hey, you guys are treating Trump like God, and he's not God. But the only people who are saying, because we have to find a minister, I bet we won't find one because they have their 501, their charity status to protect. But what we got are these blowhard Trump supporters are saying it, and then that gets out there, and then all of a sudden we get, I'm sorry, Lynn, but propaganda designed to get somebody angry about Trump ministers saying that Trump is God when probably you're going to have a hard time.
I really think that Christianity Today editorial broke a logjam. I really think it made a bunch of people sit up and take notice and rethink some things. They didn't necessarily change their views, but it put a big warning sign up.
What do you mean by that, Andy?
That editorial that the editor from the Christian Today did you read about? That was about a month ago. We talked about, and that a lot of the more evangelicals stopped for a minute and they took a moment of pause. And although they didn't necessarily take their feet off the gas pedal, it was a moment of reflection, and I think it made a difference.
I think you're right, and I even see it probably in my own family. While some of the real hard diehards might not be going that way, but this guy's going to be over, and everybody's going to come to the conclusion that this is all coming to an end.
Well, they're sort of blinded. Do they really feel it's Christian to separate mothers and children? Is that what the Bible wants? They're starting to ask themselves that. Is that what the Bible would want?
Right, and that's the approach we should be taking. Right? That's the approach we should be taking. We should be providing the alternative, challenging them on their hypocrisy and their neglect of the Bible, and not instead making the issue about how Christianity is so fundamentally flawed that it's a nationalist fascist thing. And while there are some good Christians, that are in certain churches, the real struggle is an ideological struggle between the theological nationalism of Christianity and the socialist communism.
Yeah, those pinkos, I've heard it before.
Yeah, yeah. So if we make this of Bernie Sanders, right? It's because
those terrible churches that were passionately responsible for getting us abolition in the mid 1800s, aren't they terrible?
Yeah, I know. And
the Women's Right to Vote, and that's the Friends Committee on National Legislation.org, everyone, FCNL.org, FCNL.org.
I'd also like to mention the Lincoln Project, Republicans for the Rule of Law. They're a countermanding Republican group that believes in the Constitution, and they've issued statements about what they don't like, very powerful statements. It's called LincolnProject.org, I think. It's the Lincoln Project, and it's headed up by a group of legal conservatives who want to follow the rule of law and the Constitution. And needless to say, they are not pleased with some of the things they're seeing.
So with propaganda, sometimes I see it as people want to make this into an ideological struggle, but there are three things, and maybe four, and a number of things. This is another hint about when you're looking for propaganda. Is it not only is it directed, is it a signifier that sort of stirs negative emotions, but is it about religion? Is it a divisive statement on race? Is it or ideology? I think ideology, like theology, is primarily a tool to manipulate people.
Oh, yeah, and gender is another favorite one, too.
Yeah, gender is also there that happens. The thing with Warren and Sanders, I think that was all the result of propaganda. For example, Sanders...
I wish that both Sanders and Warren would have said, we're not going to address that. That's someone trying to stir up crud.
Yes, but apparently it had something there in Warren who has taken this seriously to some extent, but I'm not sure what to make of it. I think her walking up to him after the debate, I think that's staged. I think she knew she would be caught on a hot mic. But what's going on there? Well, we heard that Warren got pissed off because Sanders supporters were trying to spread propaganda that Warren is only really supported by the wealthy, well-to-do white people.
Well, you know what? If the Warren supporters and the Sanders supporters are going to fight each other, they're going to end up with a tyrannical fascist president. They got to keep their eye on the ball and stop peddling nonsense.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Warren probably, and this is my speculation, she probably came back and said, hey, you want to push propaganda on me? I can do the same to you. Check this out. I'll tell them something you said to me a long time ago that you probably don't remember you said.
Right now, Michael Bloomberg is running ads because he doesn't believe any of the current Democratic candidates are doing the job, and I tend to agree with him. We need a person running for office who paints a spiritual and emotional vision. And these people are busy stuck on minute policy details, which they probably have no control over anyway, that nobody is interested in. And so far, it's been nothing. It's been a nothing burger, as what's his face from Texas would say.
What I would caution is that, well, one thing that we are seeing is that these are human beings up on stage. They're not God. And so
they're all wonderful people.
So they're imperfect. They're all imperfect. We're not electing a godlike, perfect person. We're just electing a human being who we think would be good in that role, competent, and safe.
Well, here's my concern. I'm concerned that to some extent, like Barack Obama, these nice people don't realize how dirty and nasty their political opposition can play.
There you go.
That's what I'm really worried about.
That's true.
Their opposition is ready for a knife fight or a gunfight, and these people are at a tea party so far. We're in a place and time when theologically and socially and technologically And physiologically and environmentally, we're at a cusp of history where a lot of old things are now outmoded, and we have a choice to make whether we can adopt the new things or not. And the jury's still out on whether we're going to make it or not. I choose to believe cautiously we will, because I believe that'll bring about the best outcome. But this is a rough time, and there may be people who aren't up to the task and who allow themselves to be duped by propaganda. There's not much we can do about it, except we got to laser focus on what we can do now. We're at where we're at, and we need to figure out what to do now. And
how do we use the Constitution and this movement with all the impeach.org people?
Well, I think we're going to have to confront propaganda. I don't think we can just let it go. I'm planning to I'm working on writing an article at LA Progressive on propaganda. I want to do a separate podcast on propaganda. Right now I'm working with a group where every group you have to deal with it. So
what I would like to do is develop a handbook or a step-by-step guide for the average person. When you hear this, be careful. You're being played.
It's like on personal relationships. Red flag, you know.
Remember Ralph Nader, unsafe at any speed? I want a propaganda version of unsafe at any phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's important to educate the public about propaganda, and particularly on the left. I mean, this whole problem is partly the result of propaganda.
A quick aside to Rich. Here's an example of propaganda. I saw Alan Dershowitz. He's now on the Trump team. He was on cable last night talking about how he's going to argue that abuse of power should not be. This gets in the weeds because of Federalist 78. Abuse of power should not be counted as an impeachable offense because it wasn't explicitly stated. So he's doing all this stuff and explaining how he's nonpartisan, blah blah blah. But then he says, and I hope the impeachment fails. Now, this guy is a Harvard-educated law professor. He knows that impeachment has already passed. That tells me he's using propaganda. He's signing on to the belief that we're coming up upon impeachment, which is not strictly true. Now, if a lay person wants to get that wrong, that's fine, but a Harvard professor would not get that wrong. That tells me everything I need to know. He's employing propaganda.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. I wanted to point out something else that I wanted to finish up an idea that think of Bernie Sanders. Trump is going to run against the socialists. If Bernie Sanders wins, Trump is going to run against socialism. So what he desperately wants, is to portray socialists as anti-Christian. And at the same time, so be wary of a propaganda that sort of makes us, it sort of appeals to anti-Christian sentiment on the left and makes Christianity the issue. So I just wanted to think people think about
one of the ways to counter that. One of the ways to counter that is to emphasize the importance of spiritual beliefs, no matter what your religious ideology might be, and to convince the hardcore atheist that they have a deep spiritual belief, even though they don't want to admit it.
Well, propaganda is just persuasive, and it's not unusual for people to be selective when they're trying to be persuasive. And is the intent to mislead on the substance of what the law is? And
but if you listen with your inner ear, you can hear not only the words, but you can catch some of the intent. A lot of people have good crap detectors, and they can tell when someone's trying to take the case to an extreme, especially to a partisan extreme. It's often detectable if you stop and listen.
Right. I think it comes from the top. You know, Trump is a propagandist, and
expert. Yep.
Yeah, and Pence is a politician first and a Christian second. So
Pence is like a marching soldier. He does whatever the commander orders.
Right. So this all is coming from the top. So it's not surprising that we would get that. One example I'm thinking of is that we are told to blame Bill Barr for misrepresenting the Miller Report. But I don't know any progressive, any liberal, or any Democrat who was fooled by Bill Barr. no one was fooled by Bill Barr. But what it really was a lack of political will to prosecute the president on those charges. And the propaganda that old Bill Barr screwed everything up. And why do people suddenly jump to believe that when it's really not true? Nobody was fooled, but it's to cover up the idea that the fact that there was no political will on the part of the Democrats to proceed.
To my friends out there in Radio Land, whatever your political persuasion may be, I believe that we have 85 or 90% of our needs and beliefs in common, and we're being played. My email is andy.special@comcast.net. If you agree or disagree, please engage me in debate. I think you will find most reasonable people agree. We agree, and we can compromise, and we can work together. We have to form a more perfect union. We need not let the politicians divide us. Don't let yourself be played by these people.
We're all subject to propaganda. It's all around us. If we think of advertising as a form of propaganda, we can begin to see how everything is around us. There's a lot of propaganda. And if it's misleading, that's really what defines propaganda. And it usually plays on a weakness that we had. It's like the comment. It's like you'll make all this money. All it takes is this small investment. They're preying on that person's greed. We're always calm because we have a weakness, or fears, or just having cognitive dissonance. In other words, people think the Democrats are all good, Republicans are all bad.
Team A is all good, Team B is all bad.
Yeah, right.
And so they have to make that conform to their reality, and that's cognitive dissonance. So
I call that binary thinking.
Oh,
yeah.
Bad.
It's like the thing with the Miller Report and Bob Barr. There was cognitive dissonance. We're supposed to defend the Constitution. The Democrats are against the Trump, but then they don't want to impeach. And, we got to find a solution to this problem, and it's Bill Barr. And so they're just playing on
the height of hubris. The height of hubris is that certain parts of the Constitution only apply when it helps me, and it doesn't apply when it helps somebody else.
We often, I've said this before, use ideas to justify our logic, our argument to justify our previously held positions, which may be partly innate, but we don't often use it to come to conclusions. We use it to argue our side, and so that's where the problem
is. That innate action a biological necessity, or is it an outgrowth of cultural development and can and should be changed?
Rich, do you want to get some more information, your phone number, contact, and your pod information out, please?
Yeah, I'm with, I write for LAProgressive.com. My name is Rich Procida. I have a blog. I blog at Modern Lectionaries, just like it sounds, .blogspot.com. And I also have a podcast called Bible Study for Progressives. So you can look that up. Just Google me, and you'll find all that stuff. Thanks, Lynn.
And his name is spelled R-I-C-H, Rich, and then Procida is P-R-O-C-I-D-A. Thank you so much, Rich. Anyway, it's all weird propaganda, and I thank you guys for all you do to bring out the truth about the propaganda machine that we're under and that we have to shine the light on to get the truth out so we have honesty, integrity. So thank you both so much for being on the talk show. It's andy.special@comcast.net. That's all he's, you can get on with him. He's got tons of...
Systemic thinking.
Right on. New systems. Love you all so much, and we'll go out with Planet of the Light by Sarah Adams. Much, much love. Blessings. Big hugs, everyone. And we'll go out with Planet of the Light by Sarah Adams. Thank you. Much love, everyone. Love, love, love. Focus on love, light, peace, and harmony, and cooperation.